What's up guys? So before we jump into the next instrument, which is bass, I wanted to quick do a video about mixing the drums. Now later I'm going to do a whole tutorial on mixing, but I wanted to kind of squeeze the little tips and tricks in at the end of each instrument that we'll be working with. So today I'm going to talk about channel routing, plugins, and automation. And of course, check out my new album, The Dichotomy Paradox. Let's get started. My routing is very simple compared to some. Okay, all of my drums are going to a bus named drums. Okay, now that bus is going to the stereo output. And that's it. And what I put on the bus is a little EQ to roll some low end, a little bit of compression, a little bit of high end sweetness. I'll add a little space to it. Okay, this EQ and this flanger, that's for an effect I'll talk about later. And then I have a little limiter that is pretty much not doing anything. There should be enough headroom there. Okay, now I've set up a main verb. You can see bus 2, I'm sending almost everything to it. Okay, except for the kick and snare. Then I've got a different reverb set up for this snare. Okay, you can see that's bus 7. And since we're done talking about editing, I can jump back now to sessions from the actual album. Okay, so here's a loop I set up from the song Dreams in the Dark. And as we're listening through, take a close look at what the reverbs are actually doing. Let's go ahead and hide everything but the instrument tracks and take a look at what I'm actually using to mix this stuff. And you can see there's only one plugin on every channel, and it's a channel strip. So I'm able to set up my filters, my EQ. I can play around with some dynamics, the compression. I can do an expander or gate. And this is normally all I need unless I come up against some sort of weird issue that I need to troubleshoot. But normally I use these strips in a very traditional way, and I don't use a gate on anything. In fact, the only time I'll use an expander is on the toms. And I use it pretty lightly. When I hit the tom, the volume comes up. When I'm not hitting the tom, the volume comes down a little bit, but it's not very extreme. And for the compressor, everything's usually about 3 dB of gain reduction. And if I really whack something, it'll be about 6 dB of gain reduction. One of the things I did on this project that I don't normally do is I used a pretty aggressive high-pass filter on the cymbal channels, and I brought them way down in the mix. And that seemed to help bring some focus to the kick and the snare. I like to get creative with my automation once in a while. Of course, you can automate your instrument tracks. Here we can see there's some automation on the reverb track. Here you can see that there's some automation for some plugins. I'm going to go over that in a second. So if we open up the mixer, you'll see that there's a channel EQ and a flanger right on the main drum bus. And by default, they're bypassed. But what I've done is I've automated them to turn on at a certain section. And of course, when the section's over, they're bypassed again. And leading into that section, you can see that the reverb has been automated to dip out in between the hits. Those are a couple weird things you can do. Let's go do something a little bit more practical. Let's hide this stuff. Let's look at the octobans. See if I can find something here. And what I did with the octobans is I automated them to come in right at the attack, and then they immediately fade out. And the reason is those mics are pointed so close to the hat, I don't want that in the mix. Now let's pop open the mixer and let's look at those octoban channels. And I just like the detail and control that I can do with automation as opposed to using a gate. Now when I play a fast double bass pattern, I notice I don't hit quite as hard as everywhere else, so I automate just those parts to come up. Now that actually sounds pretty consistent, and I like the way automation sounds rather than just over compressing it. So this concludes the drums section of the video series. The next segment is going to be bass. So stay tuned for that. Remember to subscribe and check out my website, thoughtsofmind.com, and thanks for watching.